Legislators to Watch by Governing Magazine and one of the 100 most influential Georgians by Georgia Transit. She has been honored as a champion for Georgia cities by the Georgia Municipal Association. It is our honor to have her speak here today. Please welcome Stacey Abrams.
And I want to thank the Atlanta Press Club for inviting me. And I'm about to get myself in trouble by saying hello to all the people I recognize, so I'm not going to do that. Just know that I'm talking about you. So what I'm going to do is briefly talk about what I do as minority leader, why I do it, and then tell you what we've done to you this year. And then I'm going to stop that. As Susanna was kind enough to point out, I came to this job as a fairly unique person. I'm the first African American to lead in the House of Representatives. I'm the first woman to lead in either party, and I'm the first new leader in the House post-apocalypse, or as we like to refer to as the loss of the Democratic majority. And in that role, I had to divine a way to work with my colleagues to be the leader in a very different situation. We talked about it a little bit this morning in our caucus meeting. But heretofore, the role of the minority was generally to be oppositional to anything the other side said. And that tends to be the approach that is taken by Georgia. But when you come to a role in being both the first African American and the first woman, there are different dynamics that come to play. As I've said to some of my colleagues, I've been a minority for a very long time and I'm really good at it. There's a way that you behave when you're a minority in a minority position that you cannot be when you're a majority in a minority position. Being angry can sometimes be characterized by sitcoms as the angry black woman. There are things that you can say or not say that can be characterized based on your gender or your race, or the fact that you don't have a southern accent. You can't soften it by saying, yes, honey, or no, sweetheart, or dear. And so the real goal is to figure out how to be oppositional, but also work within the structure that you have. Because fundamentally, what we do as state legislators is change the lives of Georgians every day. For 40 days, we come to this place and we pass bills that fundamentally alter how we operate. Sometimes in small, unrecognized ways, and sometimes in such large, significant ways that it alters the fabric of our society. And what I thank my colleagues for is trusting me with the responsibility of leading them in this endeavor. What that means, though, is that sometimes you can be oppositional for the sake of being oppositional, but more often we have to work together. Most legislators will tell you 80 to 90% of the time we all agree. It's that 10 to 20% where we disagree, and it's usually philosophy, geography, or autonomy. Sometimes all three at once, and sometimes pick your choice. But because those are the places we disagree, they're also often the most difficult places to find compromise. And I think leadership requires that we all try to find compromise in the most difficult space, not in the easiest space. And so the mantra that I use, and again, my colleagues have heard me say this before, is that we should first and foremost compromise and collaborate where we can. We're in the minority. We didn't win. I'm planning to change that, but we're not there yet. And so while we're not in the majority, it is our obligation to collaborate where we can, because our constituents, the 47% of Georgians who vote Democratic, they expect to be treated and to be served anyway. They don't care that our party didn't win. They care that their lives be made better. And so where possible, we collaborate. That was evidenced last year on the Hope vote, where we worked with the governor to make changes, certainly not to agree to the fundamental core principles of the changes to Hope, but to recognize that there were real families and real people who were going to be harmed, and we wanted to make it better. This year we did so talking about 1162, the charter school bill. There were those who strongly supported it, others who strongly opposed it, but again, this was something that was going to happen, so the question was, how do we work to collaborate to make it better? Sometimes collaboration can come by invitation, and sometimes you force your own invitation by voting no the first time and convincing them that they want to talk to you. We try both options, and sometimes they work. But first and foremost, I think our primary obligation is to collaborate where we can, because the people of Georgia, much like the citizens of the United States, want the work done. They don't necessarily care about how it gets done. But I think the other and equally important obligation of the minority is to compete where we should. We collaborate where we can, but we compete where we should, because we believe, as a member of the opposition party, that there are fundamental philosophical issues where we disagree. I believe that the leadership and the members of the Republican Party want to do what's right for Georgia. I just think they're wrong about how they do it. And it is my obligation when I think that they're making bad choices to not only say why I think the choices are wrong, but to offer alternatives. It is not leadership, it is not sufficient to simply say no. You have to offer a competing vision. And I believe in my role as leader, the way to lead us back to the majority is to show where we're going. As any business person can tell you, you don't win a new customer to a product simply by saying why the other product is bad. You've got to explain why yours is better. Because humans by and large are lazy and we're not going to change our minds unless you give us a really good reason and a great sale. And so my goal is to show that we have an opportunity through competitive ideas to say, here's what else could happen. Here's how we could be better. Here's how we could be different. And so where possible, we compete. And over the last 2 years, we've put out a pretty strong legislative agenda, and we've gotten increasingly better. Our batting average is up to probably about 250. First, we wanted people to acknowledge we had one. That was last year. This year, we actually got some bills out of the House and over to the Senate, where they've all died of slow and painful death. Next year, we're going to try to get them onto the Senate calendar, and maybe by the time 2016, we'll actually have them pass and come back to the House. But the goal is to make certain that we are saying things and that we're being consistent in our speech and consistent in our reach to the citizens of Georgia. I've been very proud of our caucus because we spent a lot of time in the last 2 years actually going outside the gold zone. We have town hall meetings, we reach out, we speak. We have summer series where we invite neighborhood and community groups to come and address issues that matter. And so first and foremost, we collaborate, but secondly, we compete. The third, and I think most fundamental, and the place where this body is so helpful, is holding ourselves accountable. Fundamentally, the role of the minority is to hold up to the sunshine the actions of the General Assembly. It is our job to make certain that everyone knows what we're doing for them and to them. And so what I try to do is to make certain that we are considered a valuable and credible source of information. It is not sufficient to simply be angry and to use vitriol to make your point. Our points have to be made with credibility, with empirical information, and we have to be consistent in how we talk about it. And that leads me to tell you a little bit about what we've done to you this year. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The good stuff, I would say, are three key bills that, three of them that you know about, and three I think people don't know a lot about. I'll start with one that I had fun with last year, and this year had more fun with. Tax reform. I believe in tax reform. I think tax reform is a critical change that Georgia has to make. I think our approach last year was flawed and was pleased to see it not work. This year, HB 386 came back and I think came with really smart recommendations. And it was an opportunity to work with the majority. We don't disagree about tax reform. We disagree about some of the principles and some of the intents. But we agreed that something had to be done, and so I was pleased to work on HB 386. A little-known bill was 1166, which for the first time in Georgia will require child-only health policies. Irrespective of what happens over the next 2 days on the Affordable Care Act, Georgia has never required that you offer a policy for a child, meaning that parents who may not be able to afford it for themselves but want it for their children could not be covered. And Georgia law will now allow that to happen if it passes out of the Senate. We created, for those of us who are nerds, and I'm standing in a room, I believe, filled with them, 100 creates a tax court, which is incredibly important because if you've ever tried to have an arcane conversation with someone who has no idea what you're talking about, multiply that and make sure that you actually get a penalty if you're wrong and you understand why a tax court is important. 1176, which I applaud Governor Deal for, that this is the criminal justice reform. It doesn't go nearly as far as some would like, and it goes much further than others would like. People are equally ticked off about it, and I think that makes it a good bill. It's important that Georgia recognize that we cannot afford the economy of being hard on crime. We have to be smart on crime, and that, I believe, is what 1176 begins. And what I'm most pleased about is that the governor said repeatedly, this is the beginning, it is not the end, and it is something that I'm proud to have worked with him on and continue to work with. I voted this year for the first time in my tenure for a budget bill. I voted for 741, the supplemental, but not for 742, which will be in the bad category. But 741, for the first time, stopped the hemorrhaging in our budget. It put back in place monies that we'd cut over previous years, and it was the first unanimous budget that anyone in the building could remember having passed in a long time. Of course, it was a supplemental budget, so we got to kumbaya for a few weeks until we voted no on the other bills, but it was a pleasure. Under the bad, HB 742, which is the omnibus budget that we'll be having a conference committee report on today. I voted against the budget not because I think it's as terrible as previous budgets. It stops the austerity cuts, it stops the deep hacking at social services, but a budget is as much about how you spend your money, but it's also why you spend the money and the way you spend it. And while I am happy to work with Governor Deal and agree with him and the majority on a number of issues, I think the principles are still skewed against the people of Georgia and so could not support the budget. 1162, the charter school bill, I would put in the bad, not the ugly category. I believe in charter schools. I think charter schools are a necessary instrument for improving our public education, but they are not a silver bullet, and they come with their own set of issues. There are a lot of reports coming out of Florida right now about for-profit charter school companies, the management fees they charge, and the lack of result. And I think it's incredibly important as we make strides to improve our charter schools that we also be doubly careful about how we spend the money of the state of Georgia. And given that we have a limited pot of money, this is indeed a zero-sum game. And so we cannot risk without making certain that we are providing the rewards for the children that we are here to serve.